The morning sun peeled back the night in slow, searing layers across the high desert, casting long blades of light over the cracked earth. Elijah Creed stood on the porch of his ranch house, boots planted like dead stumps, watching the land breathe dust. The creak of the windmill was the only rhythm left in this godless stretch of prairie, a lonely ticking clock in a place where time had dried up long ago. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. Didn't see the point. The cattle were gone, sold, stolen, starved. It didn't matter which. The barn sagged like an old man's spine. And inside, the house still carried the scent of his late wife's hair oil and the ghost of a lullaby that hadn't been sung since winter took his son. There were no graves with markers. Elijah didn't believe in inviting strangers to weep. The wind shifted, carried with a coil of voices from town, 5 miles east and down the hill, where the saloon windows glinted like broken teeth. Word rode ahead of travelers in these parts, and today it brought whispers about a black woman and her daughter sleeping behind the chapel, turning away bread unless they worked for it. He didn't decide to hire them, not exactly. It was more like something in his chest moved, a loose board, a dry while finding water. And by the time he realized it, his wagon was already creaking into town. She was standing outside the livery, her back straight despite the dust in her throat and the eyes on her skin. Naomi. He didn't ask her name. Someone else muttered it while spitting near her feet. She held the hand of a girl no older than 10. The girl's eyes locked on Creed, like she'd already measured the length of his soul and found the cracks. He didn't offer kindness. Just work. Cook. Clean. Quiet house. Naomi nodded once. No questions, no thanks. The wagon ride back to the ranch passed in silence, broken only by the rattle of the wheel and the girl's soft counting. Something about fence posts, maybe stars. Inside the house, Naomi moved like someone used to being watched. She touched nothing longer than necessary. Her hands were strong but careful, the way one might handle something borrowed. The girl, Sarah, perched near the hearth, not speaking, just staring at the empty fireplace like she expected something to come out of it. That night, Elijah ate stew that didn't taste like ash. He didn't say a word to her. Didn't need to. But the silence between them was no longer the kind that clawed his insides. It was a silence shaped by shared caution, like strangers walking the same trail in the dark, unsure yet unwilling to turn back. The next morning, he found the floor scrubbed, the windows open just a crack, and a faint smell of rosemary curling through the air. His wife had hated rosemary. He didn't tell Naomi that. He just walked out to the barn and split wood until his palms bled. At supper, Sarah spoke for the first time. "You got ghosts here?" she asked, voice thin and sharp like a blade undercloth. Elijah looked up, fork halfway at his mouth. Naomi gave her daughter a quiet look that said enough. He set the fork down. "Only the ones you bring with you." That night, Naomi dreamt of water, cold water rising, hands in the dark. She woke with a gasp and sat upright on the thin mattress, eyes scanning the room, finding her daughter asleep beside her. Out in the hallway, Elijah stood still as timber, hand on the butt of his rifle. The barn door had been unlatched. Something moved across the field beyond, but left no prints. Just wind. The next few days passed like dry leaves blown through empty rooms. Elijah watched Naomi carry water with steadier arms than most men. He saw the way she tucked her daughter in, singing low and breathless like someone afraid of their own tenderness. Sarah asked questions he couldn't answer. Why didn't the trees grow here? Why did the wind sound like crying at night? Why did he keep his wife's boots by the door? Naomi never asked anything. She just worked and watched. One afternoon, as Elijah repaired a fence rail, he caught a flicker on the ridge, just a shadow against the sun, gone before he could focus. He scanned the distance, heart clicking like a trigger. That night, Naomi stood in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, her hands buried in flour. The lamplight touched her skin like firelight, soft and gold. Elijah said, "You ever shoot a rifle?" She didn't look up, only when I meant to kill. He nodded, left it at that. Later, while they ate, Sarah whispered, "I heard someone call Papa last night." Naomi froze. The girl's spoon clinked against her bowl. Creed looked at her. "Your father gone?" Sarah didn't answer. Naomi reached for her daughter's hand and held it still. Elijah, Naomi said finally, voice even, I appreciate your home, but if something follows us here, we'll leave before it reaches the porch. He shook his head. If something's coming, it's already here. They didn't speak again that evening. But when Elijah checked the barn before bed, he found Naomi's knife wedged behind the doorframe, the blade clean, the handle worn. In the distance, the coyotes were quiet. Too quiet. Creed stood out beneath the sky for a long time, listening. He lit a match, held it to the end of his cigarette, and watched the wind snuff it out. The land didn't forgive, but sometimes it remembered, and tonight it remembered something buried, something coming closer. The days lengthened under a pale, relentless sun, drawing long shadows through the valley and into the corners of Elijah Creed's house. Time moved differently now, slower, heavier, as if the land itself had begun to breathe again beneath Naomi's quiet hands and Sarah's soft-footed presence. Naomi never asked for more than she needed. She cooked, cleaned, and kept to herself, but her silence wasn't the kind that asked for distance. It was more like a door without a lock. You could open it if you wanted, but you had to mean it. Elijah wasn't sure he did. Not yet. He watched her sometimes from the porch, pretending to scrape mud from his boots while she hung linens on the line. Her arms, though slender, moved with the ease of someone who had labored long and learned never to waste motion. The wind snapped the sheets like sails. Sarah sat nearby, drawing circles in the dirt with a stick, whispering to herself. On the 5th morning, Naomi burned the bread. She'd never made a mistake before. Elijah entered the kitchen to the scent of blackened crust and panic. She stood frozen by the stove, her face stiff, eyes locked on the ruined loaf like it was a detonated shell. It's just bread, he said. She didn't move, didn't even blink. Naomi. His voice softened. It's all right. She exhaled, barely, then scraped the loaf into a pan with jerky motions and muttered something he didn't catch. That night, he found her outside, rinsing the scorched pan on the pump, the water running over her hands like it was washing off more than soot. He wanted to ask her what happened, but the words stuck. So he sat on the porch rail and lit a match, the silence between them bending but not breaking. Finally, she spoke. Last time I burned bread, I was a man who believed failure meant punishment. Creed glanced at her, but she wasn't looking for pity. She was naming a fact. I walked 2 nights through cotton fields with Sarah in my arms. No shoes, no food, just ran until the dog stopped barking. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Inside the house, Sarah hummed to herself near the hearth, brushing an old mare's braid of tail hair. Naomi stood, wiped her hands dry, and walked back in. Creed watched the pump water drip from the pan, puddling in the dirt like black ink. The next day brought wind that rattled the eaves and sent birds scattering from the treetops. Elijah rode the fence line, checking for broken posts, eyes scanning the ridges with a quiet dread he couldn't explain. Something was out there, or someone. At the creek bend, he found a footprint not made by his boots. Not fresh, but not old either. Long-toed, with a heel that dragged. A rider's foot, maybe, or a tracker. He returned home at dusk. Naomi met his eyes at the doorway. You see it too, she said. He nodded once. You know who it might be? Her jaw tightened. I know who it could be. That night, Elijah loaded his rifle and left it by the door. Naomi added another log to the fire, her movements careful, precise. Sarah sat with a blanket, pulled to her chin, watching the flames with the solemnity of someone twice her age. Creed leaned back in his chair. You said you ran. Naomi nodded. Is he still looking? She looked at him, and for the first time, there was no shield between them, only the truth. He never stopped. Neither of them said more. The wind outside howled like a pack of wolves too tired to hunt. The following morning, Sarah followed Creed to the barn. She didn't speak until they reached the stall, where the lame mare stood, shifting on her bad leg. You ever fix something that didn't want to be fixed? She asked. Creed scratched his beard, eyes on the horse. Sometimes things break too bad. Sarah stared at him. Mama says nothing's ever too far gone. Just some things don't want saving. He looked at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. "Is that what you said about me?" he asked. Sarah grinned, small and sharp. "She didn't say you were broken. I figured that out myself." Creed laughed, the sound dry and startled. The mare flicked her ears. That night, Naomi sang softly while she washed the dishes, her voice low and ragged but beautiful in a way that made the walls lean closer to listen. Creed lingered nearby, pretending to oil the hinges on the door. When she finished, he said, "That song! Haven't heard it since my boy was small." Naomi dried her hands. "My mama sang it before the war came." Creed stared at the darkened window. War never left. Neither spoke for a long while. Then she said, "Do you believe in second chances, Elijah?" He didn't answer right away. "I believe in good people doing bad things for the right reasons. I believe in surviving." Naomi tilted her head. "That's not the same." He looked at her, then really looked at the woman who had carried fire in her bones and still chose to build a hearth. "I think," he said, "I'm still figuring out what I believe." Outside, the coyotes yipped again. This time, one of the calls sounded wrong, like it came from a man pretending to be a beast. Creed moved to the door and peered out. Nothing but prairie and moonlight. He turned back toward Naomi, but she was already moving toward Sarah's room, one hand reaching under her apron. Creed saw the flash of steel before it disappeared beneath the folds again. In the silence that followed, he realized something had changed. She was no longer just a cook, no longer a guest. Whatever haunted Naomi's past had found the trail again, and this time it was heading straight for his doorstep. The first shot didn't come at night, like Elijah expected. It came with the sun overhead, brutal and blinding, when the air was still and the ground held heat like an old grudge. He heard it crack through the open window while sharpening a blade at the kitchen table, the sound splitting the sky. Not a warning, a test. He ran to the porch, rifle in hand. Naomi was already there, her back rigid, eyes fixed on the ridge beyond the wheatgrass. Sarah crouched behind her mother's skirt, silent, breathing hard. They saw nothing, just wind stirring the yellow sea of grass, a hawk tracing a circle high above, and the memory of that gunshot still hanging like smoke. "He's here," Naomi said, voice flat. Creed scanned the horizon, jaw tight. "We'll see." Naomi turned to him. "You still think this land don't carry ghosts?" "I think yours just found mine." They didn't wait for another shot. That night, they moved Sarah's mattress into Elijah's room and braced the windows with old lumber. Naomi stood watch near the front door, knife tucked into her waistband, while Elijah sat near the fire, cleaning the rifle with hands steadier than he felt. "I need to know who he is," he said. Naomi didn't answer at first. Then, after a breath, "His name's Jude Fallon, ex-Confederate. Used to run a string of women and whiskey down through Arkansas. Claimed me after a raid on a free settlement. Said I was his prize." Creed looked up slowly. "Sarah his—" No, her eyes burned. "But he don't care. He thinks she is. Calls her his legacy. Says blood don't lie." Creed leaned back, rifle across his lap. "And what do you think?" Naomi stared into the fire. "I think blood's just ink on paper. Don't mean a damn thing if the hand holding the pen's wicked." He didn't argue. Couldn't. A few days passed with no sign of Fallon, but the quiet felt wrong. Too clean, like a stage before the curtain rises. Elijah rode out once, toward the canyon trail. Found ashes from a small campfire, boot prints, and a button he pocketed without thinking. Brass. Military issue. When he came back, Naomi was kneeling by the fence, mending where Sarah had pried it open to feed the mare wild apples. She looked up and saw something in his face that stopped her hands. "He's closer," she said. Elijah nodded. "You still got time to run." Naomi stood. "You still think I'm the kind of woman that runs?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked the barn and started laying out traps. Old hunting snares. Wire. A bottle of turpentine. When he emerged again, sweat darkened his shirt and the sun had started its slow fall behind the hills. Sarah watched him from the porch, her small hand stroking the lame mare's neck. That night, Creed sat with her near the hearth. Naomi had gone to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy in a house that knew it might not see morning. Sarah glanced up at him. "Mama says you used to be sad." He blinked. "Used to be?" She nodded. "Now you're just waiting." "For what?" "For something to matter again." Creed swallowed hard, throat dry. "And what does your mama say you are?" Sarah thought a moment. "She says I'm the reason she didn't let the river take her." The words lodged in his chest like a splinter. He reached out, hesitated, then rested his calloused hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She just leaned into it. Barely. The next morning, the dog didn't bark. It whimpered. Creed stepped outside with a rifle in his hands. The sun was still a red smear on the edge of the earth. At the edge of the yard stood a man on a pale horse, still as a statue. Dust clung to his coat. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face. Elijah Creed, the man called, voice like gravel in a metal pan. "You got something of mine." Naomi stepped out behind Elijah, holding Sarah's hand. Her voice rang clear. "She was never yours." Fallon turned his head slightly. "That's a matter of opinion, woman. You took what was mine, and I aim to take it back." Creed leveled a rifle. "You come onto this land again, you won't ride off it." Fallon grinned. "That ain't your call, rancher. You don't even know what she done." Creed didn't lower the rifle. "I know what she didn't do. She didn't leave a child in a burning house. She didn't sell bodies for silver. She didn't chase a woman across 3 counties 'cause she said no." Fallon's face darkened. "She got in the way of what was owed me." Naomi stepped forward. "You want to talk about what's owed? You owe me a life. You owe me silence in my sleep. You owe me back the pieces you broke." Fallon spat in the dust. "You think this little shack and that broken-down cowboy can keep you safe?" Creed stepped off the porch, boots hitting the ground like gunfire. "She doesn't need me to be safe. She just needs you to be gone." The wind caught a flap of Fallon's coat. His hand twitched near his hip. Creed didn't flinch. Fallon finally tugged the reins and turned his horse, heading off toward the canyon trail, without a word. They all stood still, listening to the hoofbeats fade. Sarah whispered, "Is it over?" Naomi's voice was low. "Not yet." That night, Naomi came to Creed's room. She didn't knock, just walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. Moonlight slanted across her face, and for once, her guard was down. "I'm tired, Elijah. Tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder." He nodded, slow. She looked at him like she was memorizing the lines of his face. "You know he'll come back." Creed met her eyes. "So will I." She reached out, touched the old scar on his jaw with the back of her fingers. "Don't die for me." He shook his head. "I'm not planning to die at all." A pause. Then a crooked smile broke across her face. Small, sad, but real. "Damn stubborn man." He took her hand. "Damn brave woman." Outside, the land held its breath. But in the morning it would scream. The fire started just before dawn, a thin column of smoke rising from the barn like a silent scream. Elijah Creed was already awake, boots half-laced, rifle slung across his shoulder, when the smell of burning would cut through the morning stillness. By the time he reached the door, the flames were licking the rafters, hungry and fast. He shouted Naomi's name before he realized she was already outside, dragging Sarah with one arm, the other gripping a bucket. Creed grabbed another and joined her, both of them throwing water that hissed uselessly against the blaze. The dry boards lit up like kindling, and within minutes, the roof groaned and folded inward with a roar. The mare's stall had been empty. Sarah had let her out hours ago, as if she'd sensed something coming. When the last ember died, they stood shoulder to shoulder in the ash, faces smeared with soot, breathing heavy. Naomi turned to him, voice raw. He was here, watched us sleep, then lit it and vanished. Creed nodded once. No more waiting. They didn't speak of plans. There was no strategy, no map, just a quiet understanding formed over months and sealed in fire. Creed brought out 2 rifles and 2 canteens. Naomi packed bread and salt. Sarah stayed behind, instructed to hide if anything felt wrong and to trust no one but herself. They rode at midday, two silhouettes cutting through the wide-open land. The trail led west, toward the stone ridge where Fallon's horse had disappeared days before. Creed knew the canyons there, tight, winding things where sound died quick and the light never stayed long. Naomi rode like a woman with nothing left to lose. Creed had never seen her face so still, not even when she'd told him about the blood in her past. They found Fallon's camp an hour before sunset. Smoke from a cook fire curled behind a narrow outcrop. The sound of clinking metal echoed down the gulch, saddle buckles or ammunition. Creed signaled with a glance. Naomi nodded. They dismounted without a word. The ground here was red and soft, packed with old bones and buried guilt. Creed took the high flank. Naomi moved low, weaving between boulders like she'd done it 100 times. Fallon was crouched by the fire, cleaning a pistol. His horse stood tethered nearby, twitching nervously. Naomi stepped out first, rifle aimed. "Drop it." He froze, turned his head slowly, the grin already forming. "You brought him with you?" Creed emerged from above. "I came to end it." Fallon rose to his feet, hands slightly raised but not empty. "You sure about that? You shoot me, and half the law call it murder." "You ain't law," Creed said. "Ain't even a man anymore. Just a shadow that don't know when to lie down." Fallon's eyes darted to Naomi. "You tell him what you did? How you slit the throat of the man who owned you, took his gold, ran like a dog." Naomi didn't blink. "I killed the man who tried to sell my daughter. You call that murder, I call it mourning." Fallon laughed, low and mean. "You think this ends with a bullet? You'll never be free. Not out here. Not ever." Creed stepped closer, rifle steady. "Then I'll make damn sure you're not breathing when you try to prove it." Fallon's hand twitched. The shot rang out before it moved. Naomi fired, her rifle bucking once. Fallon staggered, clutching his chest. He looked surprised, more than anything, as if he hadn't truly believed she'd do it. He dropped to his knees, then onto his side. The fire crackled. The horse reared once, then stilled. Naomi exhaled, slow and hard. Creed moved to her side, his hand resting on her shoulder, neither guiding nor steadying. Just there. Fallon gurgled once, then still for good. They buried him in the gulch. No stone, no words. Naomi stood over the grave a long time, the wind tossing ash into her hair. "I thought I'd feel clean," she said, "but I just feel empty." Creed looked down at the broken earth. "That's the price. You don't get clean. You get quiet." They rode back under a blood-orange sky, silence thick but not heavy. Something had shifted between them, not just shared violence, but a kind of chosen loyalty, the kind that stays when fear goes. When they returned to the ranch, Sarah ran from the house and into Naomi's arms, pressing her face to her mother's chest and sobbing. Naomi held her tightly, murmuring words that didn't matter except that they were hers. Creed watched from a few steps back, hands tucked in his belt. For the first time in a long while, the ranch didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like something that might hold life again. Over the next weeks, they rebuilt. The barn was gone, but the smokehouse still stood. They used its frame for shelter until Creed could cut new beams. Sarah planted seeds in the soil by the porch. Naomi hung her own curtains. Some nights, Creed still rose before dawn, staring out into the hills like he was waiting for something. But now, when Naomi woke, she found him beside her, not distant, not unreachable. Just there, Sarah carved 3 letters into the porch rail with her small knife, S, N, and E. When Creed saw it, he didn't say anything, just ran his fingers over the grooves and smiled. There were no more gunshots, no more riders on the ridge, just the wind moving through the grass, the thump of a hammer and the sound of a girl laughing. The land hadn't forgotten, but maybe, finally, it had forgiven.